Hello, everyone in Connecticut. I am Selena Rifkin, and I am here with the Connecticut Common Sense podcast. And today we're talking with Kim Novak. She is a licensed clinical social worker, and she's been looking at violations of our medical privacy in Connecticut. We always assume that anything that we do medically is private, that no one else is going to know anything about this. And how many times have we been in our doctor's offices and signed one of those HIPAA forms? Everybody's done that. We all know what that looks like. So we all think things are private. Turns out that's not so much. Now, as I was looking into this, I realized that I didn't really understand what HIPAA was. And after reading Kim's work, Kim, I'd like you to please explain about exactly what HIPAA is and how that relates to workers' comp and mental health, because those are very relevant issues.
Good morning. Well, we do think that HIPAA protects our privacy rights, but it's been so co-opted that it no longer protects us. There's the illusion of protection to privacy and informed consent. So, federal HIPAA was created and it set a minimum standard for privacy rights. And those apply to healthcare providers. But we now have many other actors involved in healthcare, including apps and developers and electronic health record software, Epic, the government, nonprofits, all kinds of other people involved in healthcare that are not bound by HIPAA.
Mm.
And so when they wrote HIPAA originally, they specifically excluded workers' comp, which back then used to really just cover more physical conditions if somebody hurt their knee or their back and a physical injury. But Connecticut now has PTSD legislation that allows responders specifically to have traumatic exposures covered as a work injury under HIPAA, under workers' comp, and HIPAA does not apply. So there's a lot of gray area and there's a lot of room where we can tighten things up and set a higher standard for privacy rights. And we can talk more about that, but that's overall what's happened with HIPAA. And there's a piece in that we can talk more about under HIPAA that says if two entities have a business associate agreement, BAAs, that we don't need consent to share. So as a private practice provider, what that would mean if I hire an accountant, I don't need consent for that person to go through my taxes, for instance, or running numbers for me. But now we're talking big organizations and subsidiaries like CVS and Anthem, and they all create subsidiaries and they're all sharing the data.
So these are all these large organizations, because they're technically businesses as opposed to a sole provider, are able to just share data basically because of a little hole in this law.
Correct.
Okay, so I want you to talk to me about Connie, Connecticut, because
Um,
that was the piece in your writing that was the most difficult for me to understand. It didn't make any sense to me.
to me either. So, we found out about the Connie exchange during the lockdowns for the pandemic. And it was rumor, somebody said, "Hey, did you hear we have to start sharing our records with the state?"
Now,
Um,
is this for mental health people?
well, I didn't know. I just heard a rumor about it. And so I'm like, that can't be true. And then I kept hearing more. So I looked into it. And what I discovered was that in, I think it was 2021, maybe 2020, we started hearing the rumors. But the state of Connecticut, under the Office of Health Strategy, mandated every single licensed healthcare provider in Connecticut to connect our laptops and electronically share in real time full medical records, including notes.
Wow.
So I thought there must be a mistake. I must not be understanding this right. And I researched and found out no, there was a mandate. They passed a law. They'd been trying to do this for a long time, but they finally just pushed it through. And I'll explain how they did that in a minute. But basically, the mandate was we were required to sign consent to 40 some pages of legal documents where we took the liability for any cyber attacks or breaches and had to pay fees, I believe. I don't participate, so I'm not really quite sure on all of the workings of it. I
But
refuse.
you had liability. If they had a data breach, it was your fault.
Yes. And my little laptop, even though this big data center, yeah. So nothing made sense. I wanted nothing to do with it. I said, absolutely not. And I thought, well, maybe there's an exemption for mental health. In Connecticut, we have really good, long-standing laws that protect confidentiality. Everybody expects, as a therapist, when you go to a therapist, it's private. Like everybody expects that. This violates that completely.
What are the
And
consequences of people not being able to trust that part of the system?
100%. There's people that have not known about this, have seen other therapists that aren't being told.
So
Most,
what is the consequence to the patient if they are they, what happens if someone comes and sees a mental health professional and they don't think that that information is going to be private?
what can they do if they find out it's
No,
being
I mean,
shared?
what are the personal, what's the, like, are they going to be honest with you?
Well, they're supposed to. That's what our code and our licensing says is that we're supposed to provide full informed consent on day one of what's protected, what the policies are, what their rights are. And that's not being followed. So I filed a complaint. All of the hospitals are doing this by having people sign a scribble pad when you go in for urgent care or your PCP or wherever. These big systems have you just sign a scribble pad for consent.
Mhm.
And really, when I've asked for the paperwork, it wasn't just consent to treat, it's waiving
Wow.
all of your privacy rights. Ask them for the printouts before you sign a scribble pad. That's illegal. It
Okay.
violates our privacy rights and HIPAA. Full informed consent says, I read the document, just like if you were signing a bank loan and you sign
Right.
all those papers, you're supposed to see what you're agreeing to. And what I found is that in their consent to treat, which sounds simple, that would be a line.
Right.
Really, what you're waiving are your rights to your mental health, privacy, depression, anxiety, screening, substance abuse, your STD status, including HIV, photographs, videotaping for educational purposes. The use of AI is now embedded in a lot of the different systems. So it's listening in the background to your doctor's appointment to enter directly the data into Epic.
Wow. Wow.
And now Epic, which is one of the biggest EHRs, electronic health record, it's the
What does Epic stand?
software that we all use to enter our data to make a medical note. And those notes track your medical history as much as submit billing
What is
and
Epic?
appointments.
So is Epic medical software?
It is.
Okay. All
It's
right.
the biggest software, and that is the system that providers use. And the patient part of that is my chart. So
Right.
if you go into my chart and you can see your data, so can everybody else. And
Wow.
Connie and is now a part of Epic,
Okay.
and Epic is sharing your records to Connie.
Wow.
And that part is not in many hospital systems disclosures. And I've filed complaints on that. No response. Nobody's touching this. Massive violation of our privacy rights. They don't care.
So, so what happens if you don't sign the agreement that the state wants you to sign, or that business agreement?
Well, we'll see. So when I found out about what Connie was and that they did not exempt mental health, and there, I will say there's been a group of people in the background meeting, they formed coalitions and they are providing testimony and trying to work with the state to advocate for better privacy rights and control and patient control of that data. So there's a little disclosure that says some records may not be allowed without consent. But the important part of Connie that I want to stress is that our legislators passed this with no informed consent required. They had tried to do this for years and they passed it with giving assumed consent. You are automatically opted in and you have the right to only opt out. But they haven't told people they're doing it, so nobody knows about the right to opt out. And that's data rape. That is not consent. That's date rape 101. You can't assume consent.
I like the term data rape. And
Yeah.
is there a way to opt out? Because we can put that in the show notes.
Yes, there is. You can go to Connie, conniect.org, and you can go to their opt out page. But my understanding is Connie, let me add a piece. So OHS, Office of Health Strategy, created the Health Information Alliance, which is a nonprofit.
And this is in Connecticut, right?
In Connecticut, it's
Okay.
the Health Information Alliance. They made that nonprofit. That nonprofit is overseen by UConn.
Woohoo.
Rather than their own group, they just contracted, I guess. I don't know if there was any bid. So UConn is overseeing this, and basically it's just a cloud. It's a data center. They collect all of our data without our consent. All of it will list, if you go to Connie, it lists all the organizations and providers that are automatically providing this.
Wow.
So
So,
you can opt out under Connie, but if you don't tell your provider to stop sharing it,
right.
Connie says they won't share it. It won't be shareable in their system, but that provider doesn't get notice that you have opted out. So they're still
Wow.
sending your data. So you have to do both. You have to opt out of Connie and tell your providers you opt out and you don't want your records shared to Connie.
That's an important consideration. And since I tend to go to alternative practitioners, this isn't something that would be in my head.
Yeah.
Um, does that apply to dentists too?
Everybody who has a license, acupuncturists, chiropractors, naturopaths, all
Okay.
of us
Okay. Oh,
across the board.
that's really good information. Thank you.
Yeah.
So how does this relate to the more national level? Like, can you talk a little bit about exactly what a health information exchange is and
Yeah.
how that relates to the Office of Health Information Technology? Because I know that is a more national, that is the next step up.
It is. So, in my research about what is this mandate, where did it come from? What I did was track that to the federal level under Health and Human Services, the office of this ONC, the Office of the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology.
That's
They've
a
changed the language. It's hard to keep up. Connie keeps changing their website for opting out and revising because they are being pushed about legal concerns.
Well, I'm sure that's
Um,
deliberate. I'm sure all these name changes and complicated stuff, I'm sure that's, yeah,
yeah,
I'm sure that's deliberate. Continue, please.
agreed. So on the federal level, ONC issued national mandates. So this is not just Connecticut. I have a post on X where I went state by state and showed if you live in this state, here's the link, here's how to opt out. That's online. That's probably why I'm also shadow banned because I've been fighting this for 5 years now and filed over 100 complaints to the feds, to the state, to representatives, Democrat, Republican, to all the advocacy groups, to the Bar Association. Nobody responded. Two people, Dr. Malone and Dr. Senator Anwar, said he would research that on the state level. So the federal level issued these mandates across the board, and they held an event called Datapalooza where they were celebrating the collection of all of the data. And they have alliances. They had Jason involved, who are like the DARPA scientists. They have partnerships with global groups that I cannot talk about. They have the Karen Alliance. Karen is the tech firm, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, CVS, like all those groups have an alliance. They're ready to help share our data and give us apps and devices to track everything. So now we have all these players involved. Um, One of the people from ONC worked in Boston with a lot of those people who created the software for that, and he got a waiver from Biden for an ethics
Mm.
conflict, and they said no, that's fine. And they all designed the platform, so not only do we all have our own HIEs, which are clouds collecting all our data, but they are interoperable. They built the platform for all of those systems to communicate.
Mm.
The next level is global. They all communicate. This is the digital ID. The platform is there. They're implementing it slowly.
I want to quote from the organization called the Global Digital Health Partnership. So their vision includes facilitating international best practices in the use of data and technology to advance healthcare, providing opportunities for policy code, production and knowledge transfer, and facilitating horizon scanning to more accurately forecast emerging trends. And I gotta say, it's really difficult to see how sharing an individual citizen's data in order to accurately forecast emerging trends benefits the patient.
Well, this is the WEF agenda where they said data is the new oil. There is a lot of money involved in this, and
Okay.
it's very hard to stop the train.
Okay.
The WEF made a policy, the APPA, that says for the social good, we don't own our own information. It needs to be shared and collaborative. And
Wow.
they're doing away with individual privacy rights because the good for society trumps that, or
Wow.
at least has to be considered as a part of that,
Wow.
as does technology. So it's a different framework. And that's what we are following, to the point where ONC, our federal ONC in the US, was hosting that Global Digital Health Partnerships website on our page.
Wow.
We were the host, and I forget the individual's name at the time, Steve Posnick, I think, was the president of Global Digital Health Partnership, or the chair of it at the time.
When
We
was
were very involved in that
when was
globalist.
you said is that still the case? Are we still
I
hosting?
have not gone back to that. I found that
Oh,
probably 2022. I
okay.
think I saw that it was removed from our website, our US website,
Okay, because
as a
I do
host.
know I think are we not out of the WEF at this point? I think we
We're
are.
not funding it, but we haven't removed ourselves as a partner, I believe. The same with the
Okay.
UN. So the United Nations, WHO, which is a part of the UN, and
Okay.
then this global digital partnership, all over in Switzerland, who have immunity,
Okay. Wow. Okay. All right.
are all collaborating.
Okay. All right. This is good to know. So, we have mandated information sharing. What happens if an individual provider doesn't cooperate with that?
So basically, what the mandate was forcing providers to sign a BAA, a business associate agreement. The government was saying, me as a private business owner and independent healthcare provider was being forced to sign a business assignment, a business agreement with Connie.
Right.
And that if we did not, there were federal rules we were watching closely. I think those rules got announced in 23 or 24. They announced penalties. So I am now an agent who is committing information blocking. That's their title. Sounds super serious and formal to be an agent of something. And they announced penalties where we could have financial penalties, like our reimbursements reduced. We can be blocked from participating with health insurance companies for up to a year.
Wow.
We can be listed as agents who blocked information and publicly punished and shamed, I guess.
Now, you said you can be blocked from participating in insurance companies. I assume that includes workman's comp companies?
That hasn't really been addressed. I didn't see that, but I would think so because they're a private company, as is,
Right.
for health insurance, all the big players there. And
Okay.
really, Medicaid, Medicare sets the tone. So whatever they're able to implement on that level federally with them, all the commercial insurers follow suit.
Okay.
So keeping our eye on Medicare, Medicaid, and what happens is a good indicator of what the others will follow. So there are exemptions to some of those penalties. One is about data privacy concerns, of
Mhm.
course, concerns for safety, like for securities, cyber attacks,
Mhm.
which are exactly my concern. It's not safe. They're all hacked. The government gets hacked. Anthem gets hacked. How is this not going to be hacked? Huge national security risk, especially for the folk I work with police, SWAT, military. There's no way that those individuals want their private therapy notes
Heck
shared with the
no.
government or anybody else. So I won't
Hard
comply.
enough to get that demographic into therapy in the first place.
Well, they know the position that I stand on with this. I consulted an attorney. I have him on standby if they came for my license for not complying. And I found my own loophole under HIPAA that says individuals have the right to request a restriction. Providers don't have to agree with it, which is bizarre. So you can ask me not to share your data, but I get to say, no, I'm sharing it anyway. Who would see a therapist who does that?
Oh my God.
It sounds like, some kind of a, criminal pedophile or something. Like, I don't respect your rights.
So
Um,
the patient has to specifically restrict, say, I don't want you to share my
correct.
information.
And I have the right to agree or decline that. So I have a form, and 100% of the people I work with have been signing that form saying, no, I don't want my records shared. And then I sign and say, I agree to respect your wishes.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's secure.
Well, as long as they do that with everybody,
Let
that's
them bring it. I will fight that battle all day long, as will many of my colleagues. We've all stood against this,
wonderful.
and we are not compliant, and we won't be.
Okay. And that's what it's gonna take. So how many complaints did you file about this particular issue? Because we'll be might be moving on to some other issues here because your life is
Probably, I don't know. I think it was close to 100 complaints. I
okay.
filed direct to HIPAA, to ONC, to HHS, to civil rights, to FTC, I think, who oversees the standards of compliance and informed consent, to representatives, like I said, all of the local people, and only Dr. Malone responded. And then I had about maybe a 10-minute talk with Senator Anwar. So Senator Anwar in Connecticut is a physician at Manchester, ECHN, and also a state senator. And he was unaware that this was happening.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, what's what happens is the institutions just streamline the consent stuff, and the doctors don't know what's being done when people check in. So
Mhm.
he wasn't even aware that his records were being shared to the state.
Wow.
And he said, we cannot have this, but nothing. I don't know what's happened. He
Right.
was going to call the commissioner. He was really upset.
Okay. Um, so when you didn't get that response, what happened next? What was your next attempt?
Well, I continued some research online. I was being shadow banned. I joined X specifically to blow the whistle and to try to get information out. Um, and like I said, I was quickly shadow banned for blowing the whistle and raising alarm about digital ID. And there were a couple of folks on X that helped me get word out. There was the anti WEF and Resist CBDC, who were already very aware. They knew exactly what I was talking about. So they were really promoting it. And in the research that I continued, I found that the HIEs, like what Connie is, and these mandates are embedded in the National Defense Authorization Act.
Okay.
So if there is a disaster, it states that they will utilize the HIE data for reunification and emergency services.
Okay.
And when I saw that, I kind of abandoned the fight because I'm not going to change the NDAA. It was very alarming that it's embedded in everything. They've been working on this
For a
and
long
implementing it behind the scenes, and now it's just there, it's up and running. So I stopped that fight and I focused on more local issues.
Okay. And so when you were sharing this information on X, what happened?
Well, I was immediately shadow banned. I had people challenge that. And I decided then to kind of, once Trump was in office and said he was going to withdraw us from the UN and WEF, which I was thinking at that time, okay, they're the ones pushing digital ID. We're safe. Bring my focus back to my state on a local level. I started the Connecticut Coalition community on X. And it was to just focus on really good stuff that was happening in Connecticut, people who are fighting the good fight. That's how we met a lot of really amazing people on there doing great work. And we wanted to highlight and promote that. And that space was so sabotaged, and it continues to be sabotaged. Um, we would hold a space where people would come in and talk about what they were working on, whether it's voter registration or podcasts or voter ID, and any number of things in Connecticut, candidates who are running, how to run a campaign. And while we were holding the space, we would lose our microphones. The space itself dropped one time 13 times. It just kept ending. And we would have to restart, and people would have to refine the group. We can't call speakers up. We can't hear each other. We were throttled under that. So along with my personal shadow banning, where I might have a couple thousand followers, I would get 12 views, sometimes 0 views on posts that I would make. Now this group was being really sabotaged from the inside. And so I wanted to know, who's doing this? Who is interfering with our free speech and our privacy rights, from Connie collecting our data to now this, not letting us speak freely and at least educate the public. That led to my filing a FOIA request to the Secretary of State. And we had hired a misinformation specialist,
The state of Connecticut had.
the state of Connecticut under
I sure didn't
Secretary
have
of
anything to
State.
do with that.
I'm sorry?
I said I sure didn't have to do anything to do with that, and I don't think you did either. So I'm not sure we applies here, but
Right. Yes, you're right. They hired a misinformation specialist to look at election fraud. And I think it was in 21. So I filed a FOIA complaint or a request for information between the Secretary of State and specifically that information specialist and X, because I wanted to know who's interfering and meddling with what we're trying to do here. And took a bit, and then I only was given the year 2022, and they said they had no further records for 23 or 24, which would be very odd since they are monitoring election fraud, but they didn't do the years leading up to the election. But 22 is also, I think, the year that Elon bought X, and maybe he broadly tried to stop that.
mhm.
But I think there's still players involved that are manipulating what's going on with that.
So you have, is there a place where people can look at those FOIA requests?
Absolutely. They can go to the ConnecticutCoalition.com website and look for the X files. So I posted those.
Okay.
They
Well,
released, I don't know, maybe 50, but they were sometimes chains of communication back and forth. And so there was maybe a handful once I printed the entire thread. But what that revealed was very concerning. I have a complaint into the FOIA Commission for the remaining years, 23, 24, and 25. And we will sue for that information if we need to. But what we did find was the Secretary of State, X, and CIS, the Center for Internet Security, all communicating and flagging us for misinformation. And they said that there was no ballot stuffing, that migrants weren't voting. And now we know that that is true. So we
Yes.
were being censored for the truth.
Yes. Yes.
And just also to note, CIS is another nonprofit that's based out of New York. And interestingly, they have the Secretary of State listed as their agent in their business filing.
Our Secretary of State.
Our Connecticut Secretary of State is the agent for a private nonprofit. So we seem to be tracking this model where we have the government creating their own arm as a nonprofit and sending the money through that to do their work. And I believe at least some nonprofits are exempt from FOIA requests. So it's very concerning on many different levels.
Wow. Yeah, sure is.
And some of the folks involved with this are military cyber experts.
Ugh, okay.
So, not a jump to think they'd have technology to still interfere with laptops. I think this is my third laptop that's burned literally as I was doing research on this. The hard drive, the fan goes crazy, the hard drive melts, my device is dead, I replace it. I think this is the third one. My phone, same thing. Overheated, couldn't charge, said it was underwater when it wasn't. That when you see a pattern of our phone calls are echoing, you hear a lot of clicking. Like, we're not terrorists. I'm a therapist. If they don't know the difference between the two, something is seriously wrong. But you know what they did to Tulsi. So,
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing to stop them from doing this stuff to us if they can get away with it.
correct. That's very concerning.
Yes. So after all that, despite all of the pressure and the stress and the being after this for 5 years, you have not given up fighting for patients' rights.
I
Um,
don't.
and there's still an issue in Connecticut around workman's comp. So why don't you talk to me about that a little bit?
Okay. So, I found out that workers' comp is not covered under HIPAA, which I never knew. And so, specializing in work with responders and military and public safety corrections, when we were able to establish the PTSD legislation for responders in Connecticut, I believe that was 2020. We thought that was a big win. And really, it just seems like one more avenue of being able to collect data. So workers' comp agencies are businesses. They're private, just like Anthem or Cigna.
Right.
And they're for profit. They make billions of dollars.
Mhm.
They are paid by our tax dollars, by the municipality. They buy a workers' comp policy to this business, and they're pricey for coverage for injuries of their employees. And so responders employed by their communities now, if they have a horrific traumatic incident, we won legislation saying that those PTSD injuries are work related and need to be covered under comp. So we thought that was good, except what we found is one, I have to share my notes with them for every session
Right.
to justify it, right, for medical necessity. So now I'm sending mental health information for the first time, which is entirely different than, say, an x ray of someone's knee. It's much more private. We
Yes.
have to send those notes to comp, and they're not bound by HIPAA. So we don't know what they do with it, who they share it with, where they store them. HIPAA regulates all of that: storage, security, privacy. So there's nothing that binds them in protecting those records. They've often said, I didn't receive your notes. Can you send them again? No, you lost HIPAA. What are you talking about? So if they don't want to pay, which is the standard that they will automatically refuse, kind of like what Cigna was doing, automatically denying pre-authorization requests, Comp automatically denies requests, which forces the responder to hire an attorney to go to a hearing, and the hearing is held under the Workers' Comp Commission of Connecticut. That's a state department
Mhm.
with judges and attorneys. I have wrote to them asking for assistance to protect their privacy and have gotten nowhere. I started fighting that fight in December.
Wow.
That it's not a medical record, that they're not bound by HIPAA, that it's for taxpayer transparency. So the hearings are public, the notes are public, the forms are public. There's no privacy rights. And so I did what I always do, I write research further, and I found that the state created legislation protecting inmates' privacy rights for healthcare. So
Wow.
even though they are taxpayer funded, and guess who covers that? UConn provides health care to the inmates.
Mhm.
Those records are protected.
But
So
the
we now have criminals have higher privacy rights than responders with
wow.
legislation. So the fight this fall is to establish the very same legislation they used for inmates for first responders, mental health, PTSD claims to comp. So again, federal law only sets the minimum. We can always have stronger protections. We can't have less than the standard on
Mhm.
the federal level. So the push for that is to provide our responders, public safety corrections, the same coverage that inmates have. That's all. And to stop breaching their mental health rights. It's not the same as a knee x-ray.
It
So I, after getting nowhere on that, sent a letter to AG. He does not respond to my complaints at all. He's out fighting with Invisible for migrant rights, and got nothing with that. Tried to reach out to the commissioner for workers' comp, got a pretty nasty response that they don't have to basically and don't want to, or they were going to, but then they never did. So we're coming up to, 9 months, approaching a year in December when I started fighting that. So I reached out to my colleagues. There's a number of other trauma therapists who specialize with responders who are just amazing and have the same ethics and fight and advocacy and standards. And we've come together to be a voice for responders because Connecticut's so upside down anti-cop. They don't really have a voice. So we are fighting for them and trying to get these policies in place to protect their privacy rights. I also filed a complaint on fraud that comp isn't covering claims or approving cases. It's taxpayer funded, zero response on that. And we're also just one more little piece, but it's a big deal that we're fighting is under the Police Accountability Act. One of the things that they implemented was requiring police officers to have what they call behavioral health assessments every 5 years.
Mhm.
And, you know, is it punitive where we're making sure they're not bad cops? Or is it for their wellness to make sure they're healthy and we get them support? Well, what's happened is that um, there's been instances where they've accessed the officers' EHRs, their health records, their private health records, and asked very inappropriate questions. They treat people very differently. Some are there for 10 minutes, some are there for an hour. Um, and some have been sent for as being unfit. Those records were shared with their department, and
That's
people
horrible.
can be sent for a fit for duty assessment. So, it makes no sense if we're trying to get help for people, they should be referred to qualified therapists. And why are we forced? I think the whole thing should be scrapped. I think it's just completely unethical. They shouldn't be forced to have any assessment until we start doing that with our legislature. Let's start there. Let's require
That would
assessments and
work for,
psychovals.
that would work for me. I wanted to come back to the ethics because this conflict between HIPAA and the state um, acknowledging that PTSD is a genuine injury and should be compensated. That's a genuine ethical dilemma where there's a big hole there.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's probably quite a lot of those going on right now. We certainly see it. You mentioned requiring our legislators to have the same assessment, um, which seems perfectly reasonable.
Sure. And go have to do a blood test and a urine test for substances. It's just the
Mm,
same standards. Why one profession, when we start mandating mental health to a
yeah.
profession, I'm very much against it. So I won't participate in conducting a behavioral health assessment because I think it's inappropriate. They shouldn't have to do that. They should know where good resources are, people who are well trained and qualified to work with responders and understand the culture and are advocates for them and know resources and where to refer if they're not safe. They need to be in an inpatient setting. There's specialized good programs for that, not civilian programs. Very
Right.
different culture. So there's other means that they could do. They could just simply make a referral
Hmm.
and we would have their back 100% and help get resources to them.
All right.
It's simple. That's all they need to do. But again, it's part of that collecting data.
Yeah, yeah, it's for all well, I think that's true of a lot of legislation that we see going on now. It's not what they say it is.
And really, then you could look at what the schools are doing and having counselors and mental health clinics. I used to provide services like that when I started working with kids, but it's such a different intent now that it's very intrusive without parents' involvement. And it's just another way they're collecting mental health data on kids. So are our devices. So if you look at the devices and what it's collecting on us, we're on Zoom. Take a look at what Zoom collects, our biometrics, our had to do with something with like our heat, the heat from our bodies. So if you put your thumbprint on your phone, it's not just taking your thumbprint, but it's our energy.
Wow.
It's
That's
our frequency that they're tracking.
hmm
That's biodigital convergence. That'll be a whole separate
yeah,
conversation.
that would be a separate conversation. And yeah, yeah, that there's a reason I'm not on Facebook anymore, although it's probably too late for that. Um,
What people can do, though, is be very conscious and go through the things you use the most, your emails, your software, and start opting out. Take that stuff very seriously because they are truly building digital twins. You can look up Medtronics. They
mhm.
have an implant now for people who have cardiac issues. So we look at sudden death and all the cardiac deaths and myocarditis since the COVID vaccination. Medtronics can do an implant into the heart. So instead of wearing a heart monitor, it's in you and it's constant RF. Would you want that near the energy of your heart?
Mm.
And it sends data 24/7. And if you look at Medtronics, I've sent it out to people who have this device in them now and can't get it out. It
Wow.
says out loud, they're not hiding it. They're creating our digital twins.
Tell me more about what a digital twin is.
I'm not sure, but there's people who are exposing it. It's something with a compilation of all of our data that builds our equal, everything about us, our health, our habits, our internet use, what we buy, our finances, what we say online. It's all of it. It's an energy print, kind of
Wow.
like the Matrix. It's a whole version of us based on our data.
We had we last 2 weeks ago we had Austin Montero on, and he does digital marketing, and he one of his comments was that Facebook has 30,000 data points on every user. So
It's
uh,
alarming.
yeah, yeah, it is. It is.
And that's Facebook. That's not DARPA.
And it's
That's
yeah,
not
that's just
CIA. That's not DOD.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They have all of it. When I traveled, I went through TSA, and for now, it still says having your picture taken is optional. I was the only person, like, as I stood behind a long line, hundreds of people, I didn't see anybody opt out. They picked their kids up for their picture. But it's a compliance test because there's cameras all over the airport. They're not asking permission about that. They have it already. They're looking to see who's going to cooperate.
Right. And who isn't? So, is there anything we can do about this? Is there anything that helps? We have the make sure that you opt out of information sharing at your doctor's office, at every doctor's office, no
Yeah.
matter who they are. Anyone who's doing medical, tell them you do not want your information shared.
Do not sign a scribble pad without knowing what you're signing. Ask to see the document. And when I've done that, I get a huff. Um,
I'm sure.
they're not happy about like this troublemaker wanting to know what my rights are. Um, and it was, 3 pages long. And I had already filed a complaint on them for doing that 2 years ago. And the privacy officer said, "Oh, no, you can't have that. That's not HIPAA. I'm going to go educate and change every." They didn't.
Hmm.
2 years later, they don't care. So yeah, don't sign a scribble pad. Ask to see the documents. You should be able to initial, "I don't consent," like your photograph being used. Somebody said, "How come my driver's license photo is in my chart?" They're not supposed to upload and keep your photo and put it in your medical record from your driver's license. I think our driver's license specifically states they can't do that, but it was.
Hmm.
Um, opt out of data sharing from my chart. Don't use all your devices, or at least look for the opt out choice. Anthem says that you can ask for an accounting of all the data shares. I've asked and it says we don't have to tell you. That was the response.
Wow. Okay.
There's a person, I can send you the link, who was in one of our Connecticut public health meetings when they were talking about Connie, who snickers so arrogantly that there's no way to get consent because it's used so many times. It's called many use data sharing. It's
Mm.
shared so broadly. It's not reasonable for them to get consent every time.
Right. Okay.
So opt out, check what you're signing, opt out with Connie, have that talk with your doctor, make sure you're informed. Most of them aren't saying that they're sharing to Connie when they are. Middlesex shares to Connie. They don't have it in their disclosure. So it does tell you give up your mental health and substance abuse and STD rights and privacy, but it doesn't say, "P.S. We're sharing it all to Connie." So they left that part out.
So we're definitely, when you ask for this, when you tell people that you're going to opt out, you're going to get resistance. So just be prepared for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I know we're all overloaded and I know it's hard to keep up with, but try to pay attention to what they're trying to pass in Connecticut. Like there's just no rights. They're being trampled in Connecticut. Um, and as we saw with what they released in the messages with X, trying to stop and block our messages and free speech rights, and we're just losing our rights everywhere, and this train is plowing ahead and it doesn't care. So I hope people care. I know there's a lot to pay attention to and it's overwhelming, but this is critical. Otherwise, we're going to be living like China with the digital ID and credit scores,
Yeah.
social credit scores.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this has been a thoroughly disturbing conversation. Thank you so much for Kim for
So
giving
sorry. The right to know.
it is. And we need to, as horrifying as all this information is and how difficult it is to absorb, we need to know it for our survival because the
We
world is
do.
not going to be a good place if we just let this happen. Is
Yeah.
there anything else you want to add? Do you feel like we missed anything? Just want to throw something
Well,
in there before we say,
Well, if people want more info, I can share it with you to post here, but they can also find me on X as Terminator Mom, and they can go to my highlights. All of my research is posted there. It's not my opinion. I have very lengthy threads on all these topics from the state level and Connie to comp, to ONC to the globalists, how to opt out. All of that is there under my highlights. And they're very lengthy threads that nobody looks at. But if they want more information, there's screenshots of the actual page on the site with the web link. Verify it for yourself. This isn't just misinformation. It's not me speculating. This is coming from their sites. It's all documented right there. This is real and it's already here. So I hope they take some steps just to protect themselves
Yeah, if we,
and their kids, because they're doing it to our kids and they're going to grow up with no privacy.
yeah. And I will add, I'm going to emphasize that Peter McCullough did look at your work and republish it. So,
Dr. Malone.
Dr. Malone, I'm sorry, Dr. Malone.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
So,
published on, it was his, on his podcast and X, I think, as well.
okay. So you do have some, it isn't just you, and there are other people who are looking at this, obviously. What were the
Yes.
organizations you mentioned that you had connected with on
I'm
X?
sorry.
What were the organizations you had connected with on X that were,
Anti-WEF and resist CBDC because digital ID and CBDC, our finances, will be integrated. And I've done some research. The CBDC platform is the same. It's interoperable, it's global. So if they don't like what we say, you
right,
can't access your bank account.
right. Okay. All right. So once again, thank you for the nightmares.
It's a worthwhile fight.
It is. It's absolutely important to pay attention to this. We,
Thank you for bringing attention to it. If it helps people be informed, because the state is not telling them.
no, it is not. And
And at least then they have the right to choose. If they choose to have their record shared, great. There's many reasons why they would. I get that. You
mhm,
should be aware and you should have a choice.
yeah, yeah, there's nothing moral about them doing this behind our backs.
Right. Right.
All right, so I'll be adding lots of details to the show notes so that you guys can do further research for yourself and or just simply opt out. So it's been a pleasure, Kim,
Thank
and
you so
I hope
much,
you'll
Selena.
come back on again
Great
because
talking with
it's
you.
here.
Thanks for covering this and get the word out to people.
Absolutely,
Exercise their rights
absolutely.
while we have them.
While we have them, yeah, that
Have a
much.
good day.
Me too.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. Oops. Okay. I need to stop this. I might have to trim it.